In this video, I'll be talking about the worst movies DC has ever put out since I'm in the mood to trash some garbage films. This isn't a top 10 video since there's only 6 or 7 films that I'll be tackling. However, this list is in order from worst to most worst. So without further ado, let's begin with Wonder Woman 1984. I actually don't hate this movie when I first saw it. It was a fun blockbuster that felt so refreshing during the height of the pandemic. But on rewatch, this movie got worse and worse. It felt so long and boring. The first movie is also over 2 hours long, but I was never bored with it. And as a matter of fact, that movie gets better the more I rewatch it. The story here is completely dumb, and there's so many plot holes and contrivances that really irritates me. Wonder Woman can fly now? Why isn't she flying in the Justice League film? Why isn't she flying on her first film? Little problems like that shows just how much Warner Brothers didn't give a shit with the DCEU and, their timeline. A lot of the action scenes are fine, but they're total downgrades when you compare them to the epic set pieces of the first. The villains were way more boring than Ares. And of course, that scene is just... ugh. At least they captured the vibe of the 1980s, but, that's a hard thing to mess up. And, the posters were wonderful. But yeah, this is the second worst DCEU movie in my opinion. And we're gonna talk about the worst DCEU movie in just a couple of minutes. I know it's shocking to have an animated entry on this list, and there's 2 actually. But here we are. I really don't like what they did with this film. Besides the fateful adaptation of the iconic comic and hearing Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill sharing the screen together, the first 20 minutes of this film was just awful. Batgirl's role in the original comic was very problematic, so I understand why they tried to put some form of backstory to her, but the big problem is that it sucked. In fact, they ruined her character even more with that shit. Actually, that use of 20-minute prologue ruined the entire movie. However, this is not the worst DC animated movie in my opinion. No, that goes to Injustice. So yeah, Injustice is a very painful experience, especially if you like these characters. We already know how this Elseworld story goes. Joker kills Lois, Superman goes evil, he kills the Joker, Batman and Superman became enemies, Batman along with a small band of rebels fights against Superman's empire, and it's one big bloody battle. The games were good, the comics were alright, but this movie is bad. The original Injustice universe is filled with unlikable characters, but in this film, they're more annoying, and dumber too. The story is rushed, and you just don't care about what happened with the whole thing. And that ending just came out of nowhere. In short, this movie's bad. But you know what's worse than Injustice? Of course, it's none other than Justice League. Fuck this movie. If there's a single film that brings my blood to a boil, it is this film. It is a prime definition of how studio meddling ruins a movie, and this was just a laughable train wreck. The characters lacked development, the villain is lame, the color grading is an accurate representation of what the colors of hell look like, the effects... Ooh, we're not gonna talk about that one. Then the story, the fact that a 4-hour version of this is way more investing and intriguing than this trimmed down, watered down version. Again, it is just so laughable. Look, this movie's already been trashed by a lot of creators and critics ever since its existence. So might as well move on with another film that's been trashed by a lot of critics and creators ever since its existence, Catwoman. Now, this movie's already bad just for the premise alone. It's a DC movie about a Batman-related character, but it doesn't feature a single Batman-related lore or characters in it. Instead, it's gonna be about this lady with magical cat abilities fighting this evil makeup company. And that synopsis alone is already awful by itself. This has gotta be one of the most incompetent films that I've ever seen. The direction, the editing, the writing, the characters, the visual effects, the costumes, all of it was just so painful to look and sit through. So yeah, awful movie. But even if many Batman characters appeared in Batman and Robin, that doesn't save the film from being terrible. It's just so goofy in all the wrong ways. I don't mind seeing a goofy and more of a Silver Age interpretation of Batman. And as a matter of fact, I do enjoy seeing that version of the character, like in the 60s show or even the Brave and the Bold cartoon. But the goofiness of those projects were handled really well and kind of integral to the stories that they were telling. But this movie just didn't do it well. Back in the 90s, the Tim Burton Batman movies were dark and many pussies complained and wanted to have a more kid-friendly Batman movie. So Warner Bros. Decided to replace Burton with Joel Schumacher. Batman Forever was released, it was a huge success. They want to replicate that success again, so they double down on the color and neon and quote-unquote fun, and this is what we get. A tonally inconsistent, poorly written, ice and plant pun-filled neon-lit mess of a 2-hour toy commercial. But you know what? This is one of my guilty pleasures. George Clooney was fine as Bruce Wayne, but he was not a good Batman. This had the most boring and obnoxious versions of Robin and Batgirl that I've ever seen, and the villains were the most cliche and dumbest versions that you can ever imagine. But again, this was one of the funnier watches that I have ever had out of all the miserable films on this list. But the most miserable watch that I had was Supergirl. Where do I begin? From start to finish, this movie's dumb. The characters were so boring. The movie was so boring. The fight scenes were so boring. Supergirl was so dumb here. She deserved to be stuck in the Phantom Zone with the things she did in this movie. She played the battery of Argo City and lost it, and when she tried to retrieve it, she forgot about it because she enrolled to college. The villain was this witch lady, and every character related to her was so laughably awful. She's a bad villain. She got no character besides world domination. It's just 2 hours of nothingness, and it ends in the most anticlimactic way possible. It's just a slog to get through. What the So there you go. That is my picks for the worst DC movies. I might do another volume of this one, but maybe next year. Holy frick, I need to take a rest for a while. This has got to be one of the funniest recordings that I've ever had, and yeah, that's all. Bye.